And we're recording.
Okay, great. Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
That. That's my first time doing that.
So my name is Wesley Wallace, and today for the Are You Tartan, I'll be interviewing Professor Dr. Matthew DeCarlo, who's a professor in the social work department at Raff University. How are you today?
I'm doing good. Thanks for making time for me today. I appreciate it.
No problem. So I wanted to start out the interview talking about basically what intrigued you about social work and what actually brought you to Raff University.
Awesome. So for as long as I can remember, probably like in middle school, I wanted to be a therapist. So I worked at a number of different internships during my undergrad, and eventually I got steered towards social work. And sort of the reason for that was basically told that if you get a social work degree, you can do more stuff with it.
Right.
And that is sort of what I've done. That degree has really allowed me to do kind of a different thing every year, which is kind of a really, I don't know, it's just a really exciting thing, and it sort of fits with me characterologically. And then, yeah, I ended up at Radford because it is a teaching focused school that still values research, and those are getting few and far between. Honestly, at this point, you have a lot of universities that are either trying to become really research heavy universities and bring in a lot of grant funds, or ones that are just very small universities and are just focused on teaching. So this is sort of that nice middle ground for me, and I'm happy to be here.
And as I was looking at your curriculum vitae, from 2003 to 2007, you actually acquired your Bachelor of Arts in Psychology from the College of William and Mary. So, what kind of landed you toward going to William and Mary?
It was the best school I got into. I'm actually from New Jersey. So yeah, I applied to a bunch of schools, and that was the best one I got.
And when we think of social work, it's kind of a lot of people refer it as social helping in a way.
Yeah.
It's kind of like an academic discipline and profession that concerns itself with individuals, families, groups, and communities in an effort to enhance social functioning and overall well being. And then it's kind of like many people, as I was doing research on it, social work helps people and families cope with different problems and try to help them find solutions. But when it pertains to school social workers, they work to develop plans and strategies to improve student performance and social development. So, what was it about the academic side of social work that intrigued you about it? Because you could have also gone in. It's so broad. You could have been a clinical social worker or anything else. What made you want to focus on academics?
Yeah, man. So I was a clinical social worker for 2 years after graduating with my MSW. So I worked as a dual diagnosis practitioner. So I work with people with substance use disorders and mental health issues, and just working with the social support systems that we have. So like, I think I often tell the story of a client that I had who was waiting for housing. She was really underhoused. Like her son, who was like 16 years old, was living in her living room, which is good. They had housing, but it obviously wasn't enough.
Yeah.
It was just, I mean, the way that that woman was treated inside of the housing support systems and some of the social welfare programs that we have was really dehumanizing. So I ended up going back to get my PhD in social work to try and do some policy analysis and really try and center the idea of self-determination within social welfare programs. And then while I was doing that, basically there are only two ways you can go with policy research. Either you enter like the nonprofit think tank world, or you go to the more academic side and you conduct research and analysis in order to inform the advocacy world. So I do mostly policy analysis, but with open education and that sort of stuff, I also do policy advocacy and practice as well.
And you actually got your PhD from George Mason University. You were there from 2012 to 2016. Oh no, I'm sorry, from the Commonwealth of Virginia, VCU.
No, no, no,
And
in Virginia. So I went to GMU for my master's, and I got my PhD at VCU.
right. So what brought you at first? What made you want to go to George Mason? Because I also understand you worked in their research center for a little while.
Yeah, so I don't know. So I was looking for a school in DC, and I think George Mason was probably the best fit for me. They were formerly a policy practice place, so I sort of like that they did both. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I'm not really sure. I'm really happy that I went there. I met a lot of really good mentors and people that I still keep in touch with, which is great.
And in doing social work, what is it like being a social worker at Radford in the Southwest? Like, what's that environment like? And was it a cultural shift from coming in this area opposed to a metropolitan city or, like DC or New York or someplace like that?
Yeah, man. I mean, most of my practice is in DC, and this is not DC. So, like, I think one of the things, and like, it seems kind of like basic, was like transitioning to Virginia was like, oh, right, like, not everybody has Medicaid here. Not that Medicaid is the best thing in the world, but like, oh, like, we have a really large uninsured population. Uh,
Yeah.
in DC, like Medicaid existed. I mean, there were like waiting lists. It was annoying to keep it up. But like most of my clients, the people I worked with, were like 40, 50-year-old single men, and like there's just those people just don't have insurance here.
Right.
That was sort of a big thing. And then yeah, I think just it's a big adjustment. One of the things that we talk about in social work a lot is cultural humility. So it's basically the idea that like you are always a student, you're always learning about the culture that you're in. And I didn't know a lot about Appalachian culture. Like I'm a dude from the suburbs in New Jersey, so like I know that place. Like,
Yeah.
I think it was sort of the same skills as just being a clinician in DC. It's just like, hey man, like just tell me about your culture. Like I'm here, I'm not here as an expert. I'm here to learn. I find it very interesting. I find you fascinating. Like yeah, it's just sort of part of that. And it's been great, man. I really like it here.
And growing up in New Jersey, what intrigued you about school? What intrigued you? What was your favorite subject in school? How did you become interested in education in school? And then as you got older in high school, what made you actually want to pursue social work?
Yeah. So I was really lucky to go to a high school where we had psychology classes and had classes, that were sort of similar to the stuff that I got in my bachelor's program and then in my master's program as well. So I think that's really what sort of drove me towards like clinical social work. As far as what did I like in school, I don't remember, man. It's been a long time.
And also, you've also been in a few peer review journals, academic publications. What has that experience been like, and what is it like collaborating with other people in the social work field?
It's been really great. That research project was something that I sort of on a whim, we had a professor who came and talked with our PhD cohort and some of the students at VCU about like, this is a research project. This is one of the things that I do. He was a new professor there, and he was just sort of talking about like, these are some of the policies that I studied, and this is what I do. And when he presented on that policy of self-direction, I was like, that's an idea. That's a thing that really exists. That's great. I want to study that thing too. So I did a bunch of free work for him as part of a like graduate assistantship, and then that turned into a larger project, which was really cool. So the journal publication process takes a long time. I'm literally writing an article or a textbook chapter right now for students on why you might want to consider publishing in a journal, like once you have done a research project, because one of the things we do in the MSW program at Radford, students actually do a research project, and like a good number of them would make for good journal publications.
Right.
So yeah, I think it's just about like not selling yourself short, so that if you have done the work, it's really only like half of the actual work to get the project done, the data analyzed, to talk to everybody, to figure out what your results are. But if it just sort of sits on the shelf after that, like I'm sure it was great for you, but it's kind of useless for everybody else.
Right.
So it's just trying to find like what is the right audience for who is going to be like who would make use out of the information that you created. So we've done a couple of, we did a webinar, we did a policy research brief. Both our the policy research brief is free. The other two articles, we just posted one to our social archive, which is the disciplinary repository, so anybody can access it. And the other one is still embargoed by the publisher, but that will go on our social archive.
And being a social worker and also being a professor, what is your favorite part of teaching at Radford?
My favorite part of teaching is like working with students on a project that they consider to be like interesting to them. It's a really weird niche to teach research to social work students. It's not usually a subject that they are super interested in or want to do. They are there because they like people and they want to help people. And I'm teaching them about statistics, and I'm teaching them about research design, which is not usually the thing that they're super duper interested in. So It's sort of similar to some of the clinical practice stuff of being able to acknowledge their expectations of going into that learning relationship as having a lot of anxiety, having a lot of, and not a lot of boredom, and a lot of negative expectations about how that's going to go. And one of the most rewarding things is the feedback out of that class with students who would say, that was actually not as painful as I thought it was going to be. I think I got a lot out of that. Or
Right.
I left the class sooner. I think that's one of the other favorite ones, which is basically teaching like information literacy skills, stuff that students will use for the rest of their lives.
And what do you think, not only for students, but in society as a whole, what do you think is the most common misconception about social work?
That we are baby snatchers. That is the sort of, that's usually what people think of when they think of social workers.
Yeah.
So they're the people who come to your house if there's a CPS report, and they're going to come take your kids away. So that is usually the perception of social work that you have to sort of fight against. The other one is that we are not. Yeah, we are usually the lowest power people inside of the room. So that often means that people have you can do clinical diagnosis as a social worker. Are you sure about that? Or you can diagnose autism. I don't know if you can. And yes, if you are a licensed clinical social worker, that is what you do. At least part of what you might do. And so if I'm going for policy jobs, or if I'm working on policy analysis, being a social worker and doing that is a little bit unexpected versus being like a public health scholar or a sociologist or something like that. So I think it's just sort of, people don't have the best impression of social workers because unless you start meeting one, or unless you actually interact with one, you don't really know what they do.
Right. And within your career and in your profession, I'm sure you're traveling to many different places every year, all the time. I noticed that you have in 2020 in March, you have an upcoming conference presentation called Technological Engagement as Transgression, Social Work and Digital Citizenship. Would you mind giving readers a little preview or a little overview of the upcoming presentation that you have?
Oh, definitely. Also, thanks for reading my CV. You might be the only person who's ever done it other than my dad. So, thanks for doing that.
No problem.
So the idea behind it's building off of an idea from Bell Hooks' Teaching as Transgression. And the idea is that social workers and social work professors in particular need to build alternative systems to the systems that we currently have for transmitting knowledge. So most of the work that professors do at the end of the semester gets thrown away. It's usually locked behind intellectual property barriers, and it doesn't really do anything. So the students in the room get whatever they get, and that's kind of it. It's weird to me that there are thousands and thousands of people just like me who do the same things every day and never talk to each other.
Right.
It's really, really strange. So what that is trying to get faculty to be able to do is crossing over that barrier of trying to change those norms towards how do we engage in open sharing. So it's a workshop that's going to focus on using things like the Open Science Framework, which if anybody's listening to this, you can go to osf.io. It is it's a platform for sharing open research. So somebody can come in and sort of check all the things that you did. So all your data is shared and open, your processes, that sort of stuff. But more than that, it's an open platform. So I can share an entire course. So let's say I design a course on D2L that I want other people to see because I think it's good. I can build it in that platform and attach a Creative Commons license, and anybody can look at that. As we talked about before, there are a lot of paywalls and barriers to accessing social work research. OSF also has disciplinary repositories, so places where faculty members, before they submit to a journal, can submit their publication there. It is 100% kosher to do that. In terms of what academic publishers expect, it's part of pretty much everybody's open access policy. Then you can submit a preprint, and that even after it's published, maybe you didn't do the preprint thing, and or you published an article 4 years ago, you can publish that now. You can totally put not the one that ends up getting printed, but the draft that you finally submit to them, so they format it and then it looks nice inside of their journal. It's just like a Word document, the same thing that you would submit as a student. So it's trying to build in those practices as part of the research process. So if you're a faculty member, you're starting a new project, you should be thinking about registering your hypotheses on OSF. You should be thinking about, how do I share my data? How do I sort of plan for storing data in a way that can be shared? How do I plan on sharing my results in a way that people can see? So yeah, like that webinar I was on a couple of weeks ago with some of my colleagues, there were a lot of community members. So like advocates for people with disabilities, people who work in some of the services and supports and agencies. They're not going to subscribe to these journals, but they can access those platforms. So it's a way of making your stuff more accessible to other people, and really trying to step beyond that boundary of, well, what's mine is mine and I created it, which is great. And like, this is a way to acknowledge that while also acknowledging that like your work should inform other people.
And you know what's interesting, as I was listening to you, you talked about a lot of what you do has to do with personal connection, personal interaction. I attended, I don't know if you went to last night, but the Highlander Discovery Institute event with
No, I was teaching. Sorry.
yeah, with Katie Couric and Donna Brazil and Navarro last night. What was interesting was throughout the panel discussion, Ann Navarro was talking about how she feels as we're in this digital age with technology, she doesn't see a lot of interpersonal skills, a lot of face-to-face interaction. How do you think that impacts social work in some ways? Does it, or do you think that has an impact on it?
Yeah, definitely. So I am part of a like loosely affiliated team called Social Work Tech People, who try and think about those kind of problems. So, and trying to think about how technology impacts social work practice, and most of mine is focusing on how technology impacts social work education. I don't think that critique of social media actually is borne out. I think that there are ways that you can engage in really antisocial stuff on social media, but that it is a great way to actually connect with people. I think that, there's a lot of sort of hemming and hawing about like, well, people don't belong to clubs anymore. It's like, no, those clubs have moved.
Yeah.
And I think that interpersonal skills, maybe that like face-to-face skills I could see maybe have been gone down, but like the actual engagement with other people, their ideas and what they're about, like it's really easy like for me to discover things about you. It's really easy for you to discover things about me. Like I'm as part of that like social work tech space. A couple of my colleagues just did a podcast about how they met on Twitter and wrote a book together on using technology to teach in social work education. Like
Right.
that's the thing that could not have existed otherwise. Otherwise, you have all of these like face-to-face networks, which are great, but like how many people can show up to a conference?
Exactly.
And if you miss that conference, nothing there is really durable or permanent. So I don't know. I don't put a lot of stock in that critique.
And what I wanted to ask you was open education. You've started your own platform where you've provided students and individuals open resources for their education. How do you think, because you mentioned a lot of times, whether there be textbook writers or publishers, they want to hold on to that intellectual property, and they not necessarily don't want to share it with the public within schools or students. What impact does the price of textbooks, the price of educational resources have on students, and what have you found hinders them the most?
Yeah, so I think so open education, like the movement itself sort of thinks about it as a social justice issue. So granted, like the most oppressive issue for students is tuition costs. Okay?
Right.
That is a real thing, and we're not biting at that. Textbooks are the things that faculty can control. I unfortunately cannot control how much tuition is at this school, but I can control how much it costs to take my class.
Right.
And for a long time, faculty have, there's been this relationship where faculty determine what textbooks you use, but they don't pay for them. Like publishers give us copies, although now they are actually stopping doing that. We get the same rental platform access you guys get, except that it doesn't expire. So I sort of think about this in terms of making sure that people who can't afford the $250 textbook can start on day one with the materials they need to be successful in the class. What we find from like large scale studies is that students often say that they don't buy textbooks until like they are sure that they actually need them. They've been burned by professors who require textbooks that they never use. That they often will switch classes, they will withdraw from classes. if they can't afford the textbooks. And that if they can't afford the textbook, often do worse in the course. They'll fail the course, they'll withdraw from the course, and all of that is bad. That means students graduating later, and that means students not being successful as they could be. I really see open education as a way to reach those students. It's not only sort of good practice inside of my class. The first group that I used open education with, we have a BSW program. It's pretty small in Roanoke. We have two. One of them is Radford. That's our traditional BSW program. The one in Roanoke is a partnership with Virginia Western. So students go through the community college system. These are working students. They all have full-time jobs. They are all very cash-strapped. They all have families. Like, these are the students that would not be able to buy, afford $200 in my class, or more accurately, like $600 a semester. And
right.
months, maybe like you get access to D2L 3 days before the class. Maybe your professor's nice and they email you a couple weeks ahead of time. Or maybe you've built in like, well, I'm going to check Barnes & Noble. And maybe your professor actually puts in their stuff in Barnes & Noble so you can actually see it. But yeah, it's just that part is really broken, and it's not. And there are things that professors can do about it. It is really, really like labor intensive to do. But like, if you actually like create OER or adapt OER to your class, you write the textbook. I don't have to translate anybody else's word. The students get exactly what I want them to hear, and our class time gets to be filled with like application and like, doing fun things and activities.
Where do you see open education going in the future, and what things do you think whether government or elected officials can do to help solve this problem or find solutions to this problem?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big thing inside of Virginia. Virginia is among the states that are leading on this, which is really fantastic, and it makes it a really great place to do this work. So over the last 5 years, according to Spark, which is a nonprofit advocacy group that focuses on open education, students have saved over $1 billion just by professors switching to open educational resources. That's insane. That's just 5 years of stuff, and it's $1 billion from students. I think that where things have been is like your Psych 100 classes, Social 100 classes, all of those like big gen ed stuff, hundreds of students. That is a market that OER has at this point. So like I think over half of the universities in the country use an OpenStax textbook, use just the plain OER. It's completely free, and it's published by a nonprofit. Those things are peer reviewed. They're great. They're also really accessible for with disabilities, which is also fantastic. So where it's going next is going up and out. So not just like, you're probably not taking intro to social work unless you are planning to become a social work student.
Right.
So like for big commercial publishers or even OER publishers, they're not really going to touch that because they want to go for most bang for the buck. They want to make sure that their stuff is going to be read by the most number of people. If they're going to invest the time into it, they want to get good return on it. Well, so that means that people in disciplines like mine, some of my colleagues who are in places like soil science or are working with people with disabilities using applied behavioral analysis, who are in more specialized fields, need to develop our own stuff. And that is where sort of states have to come in, because inside of social work education, there is not a lot of support from our accrediting bodies. So the Council on Social Work Education hasn't really done anything on open education. I'm working with at least one body to try and incorporate some of that stuff, but there's not a lot of movement. So inside of the state, some of the stuff that Virginia has done is great. We have competitive grants for faculty. So I was a grant awardee through Virginia Virtual Libraries to create a graduate level textbook. We also have one of my colleagues at Radford, Amy Baliha, in the School of Chemistry. So she is working on a project that is going to take their lab manuals from a $100 commercial thing to a completely free open source software that can be adapted anywhere, which is really, really cool. But it's going to take sort of projects like that. It's going to take state investments or investments from, I guess, foundations or universities themselves in order to actually try and in order to actually like transition some of this stuff. Where I hopefully see it going in the future are programs that are zero textbook cost. There are a number of community college degrees, including Tidewater Community College, which was a real leader on this, that you don't pay anything.
Right.
There's no textbook costs that are attached to anything. I heard of a BSW program that's doing that, and I'm hopefully going to meet with them soon so I can see what they did and hopefully share their work with as many people as possible if they're cool with that. So yeah.
And I know the Open Education Conservatorium Conference is coming up. What are you excited about in that conference, and what do you look forward to?
Yeah, so we did really cool research at Bradford, and I am really excited to share it. So some of the stuff that we did over the last 2 years inside of the School of Social Work, we implemented some OER and compared it against traditional textbooks, which is a pretty normal thing to do. Generally speaking, OER gives you the same outcomes for lower cost, and students tend to stay in the class. That's usually the argument, and we didn't really find that much different. But one of the unique things that we did is we actually engaged with some of our undergraduate and graduate student researchers. So they led focus groups of students. So like me as the author of the textbook, if you were in my class, you might not tell me, hey, your textbook is really terrible. You should probably consider changing it. But you would probably be more likely to tell a student that if they were running some of this and they said, you know, we'll share it with the professor later after it's submitted. So they were also a part of coming up with the different questions that we asked. They were also a part of the data analysis process. So I think one of the critiques I have of the open education movement is that there's not a lot of involvement of students. We sort of assume what needs to happen, and we go in and we swoop in and we do whatever research we do, and then we leave. Whereas, you know, coming from a more community-based research approach in social work, we should be involving at least students as stakeholders inside of the research process. So I'm hoping to present on that and try and bring that idea of community-based research to a place that doesn't really have it yet.
On a daily routine or on a daily basis, what does your day-to-day career things that you do in your profession look like? And in doing that, how do you maintain a positive attitude, and how do you personally stay humble throughout your day?
Yeah. That's a lot. All right. So it really depends on the day. The life of a faculty member is kind of weird. We have, at least I can speak for me, I have an overwhelming amount of things to do, but pretty much none of them have to be done at any specific time. So it's mostly me sitting in front of a computer in an unglamorous office that you can see part of, and just like working on typing stuff. But yeah, like I don't know, man. Like this is cool. My job is to like read stuff and talk about stuff.
Yeah.
It would be difficult for me to be really like belly achy about that. Like it's just a fun thing to do.
And what's it like collaborating with other colleagues within the School of Social Work at Radford? What's that collaborative teamwork like, and what do you enjoy most about it?
Oh man, it's awesome. So like we have different people with different specialties. So I'm working with one of my colleagues, Dr. Shapari. She's our assessment person inside our house. So she's really great at quantitative statistics. So she's working with me on doing some data analysis on the studies that I mentioned, the quantitative parts. I'm working with Dr. Vandergrift, who's our BSW coordinator, on a study of textbook costs of social work students. So one of the challenges that we face with open social work education and trying to get people to adopt these open textbooks is that faculty and administrators, it's just not on their mind yet, man. Like it's just it's not something that's percolated up. So we did a study of the community of social work students in Virginia. We got like 150 students to participate, which is pretty good. It's not a bad sample. So it's basically just trying to make the case to like faculty members, and she can really do that from the perspective of a BSW administrator, of like a person who runs our undergraduate programs. She's able to sort of make that like legible to that population, which is really where some of that top-down policy change is going to come in. And like I'm just really privileged to be in a department where like I've had faculty members who help with peer review, with help with direction for the project. I've really supported the director. I do a weird thing for a social worker. I'm not out there studying policies for usual client populations. I'm studying policies and working on policies related to higher education, which is a little bit different. And I think one of the nice things is like our department is pretty cool with that.
And when we talk about higher education, how do you think students, not in college or students in general within our education system, how do you think millennials today can revolutionize education, can impact the future, and where do you see it going or heading in the next few years?
Yeah, definitely. So I think one of the ideas that I really latch onto a lot is the idea of a non-disposable assignment or a renewable assignment, which is that most of the scholarship that gets done at universities by students gets thrown in the trash. It's just really
Yeah.
terrible. Like, it's made for an audience of one, which is probably me or somebody in my position. I read it, I give you feedback, you may read it, you might not, and then you throw it away. That seems like a lot of wasted effort. So where I sort of see scholarship going is a more collaborative approach, where students are building durable public artifacts of their learning. So you'll see some of the cool stuff that I've seen from other professors. Like, there are professors who work on like early American literature, where like you'd have to buy a $250 book, but everything's in the public domain, so you're just paying for the annotation. So students they just pulled in that work, did the annotation themselves, and that was their assignment for that class. So you have students creating resources with faculty members. You have students creating their own resources and creating like almost like a brand for themselves, and creating a space where they can share that stuff with other people. And I think that's sort of where I see things going, is being able to structure assignments in a way that sort of better honors like the effort that goes into them.
And when it comes to higher education, I'm sure like in a perfect world, faculty members or teachers, we would all just enjoy to stick with what we love to do, which is teach and learn new things and discover new things. What do you least enjoy about the system?
What do I least enjoy about the system? I think for faculty members, I think one of the challenges is like, it sort of depends on where you're at. So for me, I can say one of the more challenging things about my job is like, there's a lot of work to be done, and I think it is really easy to sort of get into a groove with how you've like taught a class, or just go with sort of whatever materials are provided by the publisher of whatever textbook you are using. And there's not necessarily a lot of incentive to do the more like really engaged like scholarship of like going in and figuring out like what is the best way to teach a lot of this stuff? How can I build my own resources off of this? Or how can I share this stuff with other people? There's not a lot of built-in incentives to doing that stuff. So like most of the OER stuff that I do, some of it might count towards my tenure and promotion, some of it may not. But there's a lot of inertia in the system to just sort of keep doing what we've been doing. So doing something different is something that is a little bit more challenging, especially for like tenure track professors who get, I get an email like every month or two or a mail, like a letter inside of my box that says, you are the next person said that you can have a job next year, which is cool. I'm always happy to get them, but it's weird. I think that stuff is always on people's minds.
And professionally, besides teaching, what are your future career endeavors and what would you like to accomplish in the future?
Yeah, definitely. So my goal for the OER project that I'm on I'm kind of done with textbook writing. I'm working on my second one now, and that's about the amount I ever want to write. That's, or at least for a little while. But my goal is to be a project manager or consultant on textbook projects that will replace the foundational textbooks inside of social work with openly licensed textbooks, and specifically help try and develop a community of practice around how do we teach this stuff. So my bachelor's level textbook is now on 34 campuses across the country. Like, I am working on how do we sort of share the resources that we use? Like, what slideshows do you use? What activities do you use in class to reinforce this stuff? Do you have any suggestions for the next edition of the textbook? So like trying to build ways where people can interact and create just share the things that they do to teach the stuff that we all teach. So that's sort of where I hope for that to go.
And professionally, besides teaching, what do you like besides teaching with open education resources, what do you enjoy most about, what do you enjoy most about open education? And then what do you enjoy about teaching? And then which one do you enjoy more between the two?
Yeah. So I think like the thing I like most about open education is that like everybody I meet is kind of the nicest person. Like they're like, oh yeah, you're doing that. Okay, cool. Here's like 5 different resources you might want to take a look at, and like, let me know. I'm happy to like help you a little bit. And so like that sort of ethos is really great. And it also, those are the people that once I got connected to that network who are, they just have a fundamentally more positive view of students and a more understanding approach towards student problems and like student issues. And I think that stuff is really infectious, and it's what sort of keeps me coming back to it. So there's, yeah, I think that's what I like about that. So I don't know if we've already covered like what I like about teaching, but like, yeah, it's just, I think the sort of the rewarding part of it is like being able to sort of subvert people's expectations of like, well, what is this class going to be like? People have a lot of sort of ideas about what it is. Usually they're pretty anxious. Like, is this person going to fail me? Do I belong here? Do I really belong in a grad program? Is that it? And being able to sort of take that place and get to a place where they feel confident enough to talk as a professional. So it's sort of seeing that at the end. We have a really cool integrative piece in our program where they have to take their own original research project and sort of use all of the other things that they have learned inside of a conference presentation format and also a public presentation. And just sort of seeing some of those and being like, wow, you got it, man. Like, that's really great.
Yeah.
That's a rewarding piece for me.
And throughout your career, have you ever personally had a career setback, and how did you bounce back from that?
Yeah, so I think one of the challenging things for a doctoral student is like you get sort of linked up with professors, and then you do the work that they don't really want to do. So like you end up like working on their lit reviews, and you do some of this gut work on their like research stuff. And like I was on a bunch of projects that didn't go anywhere. So I was on projects that got rejected, that didn't turn into conference presentations or journal articles or anything like that. So I sort of got a late start. And I think it took sort of coming to Radford and finding a thing that I can really work on. And I think the sort of turning point for me was like I had the textbook that I created, and I shared it with students, and it worked all right, and I got it revised and like ready to and it's just like, hey, there's always more to do on it. And I think just making that public and announcing it, like, I created a thing. I know it's not perfect, but this is as good as it's going to get for right now, and it needs to get out. So just being able to sort of let go of that process was hard, and yeah, I'm glad I did it.
And for some of our viewers who view this article later, if they're interested in, for some students here at Radford who are interested in going into social work, would you mind explaining just a little bit about the undergraduate, the graduate program, and what opportunities they can gain within the School of Social Work?
Yeah, definitely. So we run BSW and MSW programs, so undergrad and grad. We have 2 different campuses. Actually 3 now. So we have our bachelor's program on the Radford campus and Roanoke campus. We have a master's program at Radford, Roanoke, and the New College Institute in Martinsville. So if you are planning to come to our program, some of the stuff that you will get in our program is focused on working with individuals and families in a rural setting. So most of the students who come to our program are planning to be clinicians in agency-based practice, somewhere in Southwest Virginia or other rural areas. So you're going to get instruction that is going to direct you.
You're good.
You're going to get instruction on things that's going to help you go into agency-based practice. In like undergrad, you're going to get more generalist stuff. So you're going to be talking about things like case management, like if you have a client with substance use disorder, how do you screen for that stuff? In your master's program, you're going to get more specialized stuff about like how to do motivational interviewing, what are some cognitive behavioral techniques you might work with. So some of the really cool stuff you can get here, we have a number of stipend programs. I am still paying off my MSW student loans, so I try and harp on these as much as possible. We have a ton of students in our child welfare stipend program, which is a partnership between us and Virginia DSS. They will pay you $10,000 a year to go to school. And later you just have to give them a year of your time in a DSS office, and they will train you very well to do child welfare work. We also work closely with the Salem VA, and there's a stipend program through there, and that is for our master students only. And those students often get set up with jobs inside of the VA, which for social work, which is not a very well-earning profession. VA jobs are very good. They pay pretty well. And you're working with a very high need population. Other opportunities, we have a collaboration between us and NRBCS, which is focusing on substance use disorders, screening for substance use disorders. That's called our BWET grant. And that is also an interdisciplinary grant as well. So we have a lot of scholarship opportunities, and we just have a lot of professors with really unique interests. So we have professors who run international social work learning programs. So we have Dr. Evans, and who went to Uganda for the past couple of years to go do, in collaboration with a school of social work there, to basically engage in like an academic learning exchange, which is fantastic. We have scholars who have been published on like photo voice, which is a really cool methodology. So we just have a lot of people who do really cool things. So one of the things that we're doing this semester is, if you are planning to come, we have students, or we have faculty members who are presenting their research and sort of what they do every other week inside of the semester, because you can't really view that stuff online. You have to sort of Google our CVs and see what you can find. But yeah.
And personally, what has been the best advice anyone has ever given you? And how have you taken that throughout your life? And besides, this is kind of like a two-part question. And besides teaching, what do you enjoy doing outside the office or in your personal life?
I'm right. I'm supposed to have a personal life. All right. I will get back to you on that. What keeps me busy is I have a 1-year-old. His name is Finn, and so he's a new addition to my life. That keeps me really busy. I used to like sit on the couch a lot, and like now I have like a lot less time to do that, and it's a lot of fun. And it's good for me, which I like. I don't know, man. The best piece of advice that I have is just be kind to other people.
Right.
It's really easy to sort of fall on like, well, these are the rules, you don't do well, and not really be an understanding person. But like, yeah, it's just to just be human with other people.
And to close out the interview, what we usually do in teacher interviews is we play a quick round of trivia. And so I'm going to present you with 2 choices, and you can only pick one or the other.
All right.
So you ready?
Sure.
So if you had to pick between a dessert, ice cream or pie, which one could you choose, or which one would you choose? Ice cream?
Yeah.
What's your favorite flavor?
Cookies and cream.
Cookies and cream. What's your favorite NFL team?
Giants.
What is your favorite dinner of all time?
That's a good call. There is really good chicken korma from a Indian restaurant. I like Indian food a lot.
Favorite comedy show?
Ever?
Favorite drama show?
Okay. So probably American Dad for comedy show.
Oh, I love that show.
Yeah, man. It's so good. And it's still on. They're still kicking.
Yeah.
Let's see, drama. I'm currently working my way through The Sopranos. I think it's a cultural exchange. As a Italian guy from New Jersey, my wife is from Northern Virginia. I think it's a good cultural exchange. So we sort of view it as that.
Netflix or Hulu?
We are actually going to dump our Netflix subscription in favor of Hulu Plus.
Oh, you are?
Yeah. We just don't use it that much. Like, there's not a lot that's on Netflix that we either don't just like have or like that's not available on Hulu.
Right.
But yeah, like we have legit Hulu, like, instead of TV Hulu.
Swimming or riding a bike?
Bike riding. So we just installed a bike seat on the bike for Finn. He loves it. We're going to as a bike as like a biker for Halloween. It's the whole thing. It's really fun.
Casual or professional?
Casual. I don't look good in clothes, so I'd be comfortable. You look very good in the suit, by the way.
Thank you. Nike, Jordan, or Adidas?
Probably Adidas. They were popular when I was in high school, a long time ago.
Let me see. Converse or Vans?
Neither. I have flat feet. I can't I have like Homer Simpson feet. I can't, I need something with an arch.
Favorite singer?
The Weeknd, Abel Tesfaye.
Favorite actor?
That's a good call. I don't know, man. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a good one. Sorry.
Favorite late night talk show host?
I guess John Oliver counts. I'm gonna go with John Oliver.
Last movie you ever watched?
I haven't watched a movie in a long time. That's what happened to one-year-old is. The last movie I watched was probably an animated movie.
And if you could go to the theaters in the future or the coming weeks, what movie are you dying to see?
The new Quentin Tarantino movie. I am like I'm a bro inside, so like I like action.
And last question, what do you hope to accomplish throughout this school year, the fall and spring semester?
Too much. I so I've like three projects. I have three main things that I have to do. One, I have to finish the textbook that I'm writing with three other faculty members. We are sending it out to peer reviewers at the end of the month. And I'm very, very excited to no longer be writing it, or at least have it out for review and get ready I'm working on, I think at this point, 5 different articles, which is way too many. But I did a lot of stuff over the last 2 years. I finally got all my data in, and I'm starting to get it back from my researcher colleagues. So I got to write that stuff up. The last thing is I am working with the Office of the Provost and a couple of other places here to bring OER to Radford. So the state government, state legislature passed, not this past year, but the year before, basically said you have to come up with guidelines for implementing OER. They can be very short, they can be very long, they can be useful or not useful. And one of the nice things that Radford has done is make sure that faculty are on board and that we are engaged in that process. So I'm hopefully meeting with a lot of different administrative stakeholders and student stakeholders as well. We're hoping to engage SGA as well with just making textbook costs more of an issue on campus and to try and get Radford out ahead of where other institutions are. So far, I think that we actually are. So there's a lot of institutions are sort of figuring this out. We presented before the Board of Visitors in May of last year. So we are a couple of months ahead of where people are. But my hope is that we will have a good policy background so that in fall 2020, students can actually, that when you register for classes, you'll see which ones have either no cost or below $40 cost, and which ones are using openly licensed resources. And that when you go to the bookstore and you go to the online platform, that you will see, hey, this is free. I don't have to buy this. That's great.
Yeah.
And that sort of stuff. So that's what I'm hoping for this semester, which is too much, but I'm going to do it.
Professor DeCarlo, thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview.
Wesley, thank you so much for doing it. I really appreciate it. Thanks for everything that you do, and also thank you for the very kind words. That's part of this, and thanks. Thanks for
Thank
being.
you so much. Have a good weekend.
Hey, man, you too. Bye.
Bye.